Hey, do you have a brain? Then this might affect you. Think about some of your most successful performances. Those moments when nothing could go wrong and time seemed to freeze. That moment is called the flow state and it feels incredible. Most people have had it once or twice in their careers, and once you do, you'll spend forever trying to reach that place again. And that's where things can get a little frustrating, because if you've done it once, you should be able to do it whenever you want to, right? Why is it that when you go back to that the next day, sometimes things get so much harder? The next day might even be a bad voice day, even though the day before you found your flow. It all comes down to how your brain is wired and what each piece of your brain actually does. So let's make sure we're speaking the same language and just define our terms. It used to be that scientists separated the brain into left brain and right brain. The left-sided people were more logical, the right-sided brain people were more creative. We now know, thanks to some modern technology like the fMRI, that that is just too simplistic. Instead of just left and right, modern neuroanatomists divide the brain into old and new. This first division of your brain, the old brain, is sometimes called the lizard brain or the reptilian brain, and let's just name this one Rex. We're going to be hanging out with Rex a lot, so I hope you'll get familiar. This second part of the brain, the new brain, is sometimes called the mammalian brain or the neocortex. The neocortex is what makes us human. This is the part of the brain that understands things like language and reasoning and rationality. It's largely responsible for what makes humans human. And compared to the old brain, it is relatively new. Now that reptilian brain, Rex, has been around for a much longer time. Almost identical copies of Rex are found throughout the animal kingdom, vertebrate and invertebrate. And Rex only has one job, and they are very, very good at it. That job is to keep you alive. All of the stuff that your organs do without you having to consciously think about it, things like breathing while you sleep, things like controlling your heart rate, controlling your hormone levels. Rex takes care of all of that for you, and that's only the beginning. Rex is constantly on the lookout for threats, both internally and externally, to make sure that you stay safe. Again, Rex only cares about survival, not quality of life, only quantity of life. So if there's something that might even potentially threaten that, Rex wants to pull you away and make sure that that doesn't end you. And the thing is, it doesn't matter if that threat is real or not. Just the potential for danger can send Rex into DEFCON 5. And that's why your voice feels inconsistent and unreliable. I think we've all probably had this experience where there's a high note that's been stressing you out for months. Then something happens and you finally nail it. Maybe it was in a lesson. Maybe it was in a practice room. It's free. It's clear. There's no tension behind it. Everything is just perfect. But then you go back into the practice room the next day and it's just not there. For some reason, that note isn't working. And the more you try, the worse it gets. And if you're anything like me, that's when imposter syndrome and self-doubt starts to creep in, and it can start a pretty nasty downward spiral. And we always ask why? What happened? It was so perfect just a few hours ago or the day before. There's tons of potential reasons, but it really all boils down to Rex. Here are two possible scenarios that are extremely common. Scenario 1, Rex knows that you want to hit that note again. So when you go up for it, Rex is going to use every tool that they have at their disposal to help you out with that. But the tools that Rex has are things like tension and pulling and straining and force. And I think we all know that's not a recipe for success. Or scenario 2, that big, beautiful, tension-free note that you created the other day actually got interpreted as a threat because something happened in your past where a big noise happened and then something bad was a result of that. So that free sound that came out of you is lumped into that same category as big, potentially scary noises. So when you go to make that same sound again, Rex pulls you back and says,
last time there was a big noise, something bad happened. I'm not gonna let that happen to you again.
Rex is terrible at distinguishing real threats from imaginary threats. A lot of this boils down to making sure that Rex is accurate and consistent. Here's the coolest part. It doesn't really matter which one of those scenarios is true for you, because what we do next is the same. It all comes down to lowering the level of your threat bucket. So you know these gut feelings you can get sometimes that something's going to go wrong? Maybe you're singing O mio bambino caro and you're afraid you're going to crack the high note and your palms get sweaty and you get nervous and your heart rate goes up. There's no real danger there, but Rex reacts the same way even when there's not an actual threat. Threat is anything that Rex thinks could be potentially dangerous. Every second of every day, Rex is out there looking at what's going on in the world around you and inside you and comparing it to something that's happened in the past. Rex uses those comparisons like a crystal ball to try and predict the future. So the last time you were in a situation like this, was the outcome good? Was it bad? Or was it uncertain? Remember, uncertain also means bad as far as Rex is concerned. Rex is happy when you're in familiar situations. There's lots of other memories to use as comparison, and so they react appropriately. And this is why going into new situations and meeting new people can be stressful. There's no memory to compare it to, except maybe that one time where you met a new person and then something bad happened, so that can cause some anxiety. Here's how this might look in the real world. You're about to go on stage and you get nervous. You realize you have to pee.
One time we went in front of people and then we got made fun of. I didn't like that, so we're not going to go out on stage again. I don't care that it was 10 years ago. It could happen again.
You even think about going for a run and your knees start to ache.
Well, John went running and he ended up in the hospital. He got hit by a bus. I don't care that this running trail is in the woods. It could be dangerous.
You try to sing different rep and your voice doesn't work right.
Everyone is going to think you're singing the wrong pieces. We'd better stick to what we already know. Nothing new.
Here's some more good news. Rex has an amazing tool that you've already heard about that they use for every single situation, and it's called the threat bucket. Rex puts everything that you encounter into the threat bucket. Internal, external, real, imagined, it all takes up space in there. Didn't sleep well last night? That takes up some space in the bucket. Missed breakfast and now you're hungry? That takes up some space in the bucket. Sirens and flashing lights show up in your rearview mirror while you're on the highway? That could be a lot of space in the bucket. Whenever you have a new situation, experience, or encounter, Rex goes into overdrive, comparing that to anything that might even be a little bit similar in your past to try and use that crystal ball a little bit better, to try and figure out how much space this new thing needs to take up in the threat bucket. So just like every other bucket, the threat bucket has a limited capacity. And Rex thinks that if anything overflows or spills out, you'll die. That means that as things start taking up more and more space in the threat bucket, you get more and more nervous because, again, if one drop overflows, Rex has failed, and Rex hates failing. And if your bucket is already reaching capacity, anything might cause a spill. Let me know if anything like this might sound familiar. First, you wake up late and you rush out of the house, skipping breakfast. Turns out there was a traffic jam, so you show up to work even later. Your boss never cuts anyone any slack, so you get yelled at once you get there. You realize that you were in such a rush to get out of the house, you forgot the assignment that you were working on all night on your kitchen table. Then it turns out Karen ate the lunch that you were trying to save in the fridge that day. After lunch, your computer crashes, so you spend 2 hours on a voicemail line with tech support. You find out at the end of the day that your work rival got a promotion that you were really more qualified for. And on your way home, you get caught in a speed trap, so now you have a ticket to deal with too. Then when you do get home, you notice that your roommate put the toilet paper on backwards, and you absolutely lose it on your roommate, have a total meltdown, and have a big fight. Misplaced anger? For sure. But let's take a look at what just happened from a neurological perspective. Because of all the other stresses of your day, your threat bucket got sequentially more and more full. Then when you finally got home and saw that one little stress, which is comparatively small, that's what set you over the edge and gave you the outburst. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. And personally, I like to remember this whenever I'm talking with someone who seems overly emotional. It's made me a much more empathetic person. It's also a great acting tool. How full is my character's threat bucket right now? In the short term, your threat bucket has a limited capacity, but with time and practice, we can work to expand the size of your threat bucket so you can deal with more new things in a day without losing your cool. Here is one of Rex's secret weapons. There's actually a relief valve built into the side of everybody's threat bucket. Long before anything spills out over the top, Rex will open that relief valve on the side and let things start spilling out that way. The emotional outburst that you had about toilet paper a little while ago, that's where that came from. And that is a much better result, according to Rex, because if things kept building inside and spilled out over the top, you would literally die. And in most cases, not death is better than death. Now, when the spout opens and stuff starts coming out of the side of that valve, the neocortex, the conscious brain, has to deal with the mess. That mess can show up as a huge number of different symptoms, but they're all signals from Rex to tell you that something is going on, to tell you that the threat bucket is too full. If there's something that you want to avoid in your day-to-day life, chances are it can come out of that valve in the threat bucket. Going forward, I'm just going to lump these all into the word pain, but that doesn't always mean physical pain. If you want to see a more complete list of all of the potential symptoms that can happen, make sure you check out Hall of Fame Singing in the description down below. The list is much larger, but it's still incomplete. Now, if that valve opens a little bit and you start to have some pain, but you do nothing about it, eventually that valve is going to open up even more and give you even more pain. And if you still do nothing about it, that valve is going to open even more, and you might start to experience different types or different styles of pain to get you to take action about whatever is keeping your threat bucket too full. And if you still do nothing, eventually your threat bucket will overflow and you'll die. And unfortunately, that's not some idle threat. A relatively minor seeming symptom like high blood pressure, hypertension, can eventually turn into a stroke, and that can kill you. If you ask someone what might happen when they mess up in a performance, eventually someone will say, "Oh, I'll just die." And of course that's absurd, right? No one has ever actually died from forgetting their lines or missing a note, but that can be how it feels in the moment. That feeling, that's Rex doing its job, primitive and clumsy as it may be. Going back in your memory, there was probably a time where embarrassment led to social isolation, and social isolation taken to the extreme could mean death. The silver lining around this cloud is that when your threat bucket is relatively empty and no pain is coming out of that valve, you are that much closer to getting into your flow state, and that's when the stresses of auditioning and performing just fall away and you are at your absolute best. If you liked what you just saw, make sure that you're on the High Note Performance mailing list so you can get first dibs to everything that we put out. Also, all the social media stuff, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and now Spotify and Apple Podcasts. All of that stuff helps more than you know, and it only takes just a second. And just for the few people who have stayed right to the very, very end of this, I am including some secret links in the description down below that gets you access to Hall of Fame Singing and Hall of Fame Practice. These are the two guides that all of our clients get so that they can take the first couple of steps. I've never given these away for free before, but I've decided to just for a short time. So if you click those links and it doesn't work anymore, I'm sorry, you've missed your chance. So for now, jump in there as fast as you can and get your copy.